You could be the Navi, right? Or you could be a Kohen, the one that runs the Mishkan Beis HaMikdash. Those are the three public positions. And of course the Sanhedrin and the Dayanim, but that's really part of that system of the Nasi. The Melech is really in charge of Sanhedrin, or the Kohanim in charge of Sanhedrin, whichever way. But so comes Shem and Noach, Kishkesh Zanvo, and he says, Avram, here we are. I'm going to be the Melech, and you're going to be the brand new what? Kohen. You took over from Shem, didn't you? This was the retirement ceremony of Shem, right? He gave over the Lechem and the Yayin. What do we use? Yeah. So even the Medrash says, Lechem is the daily sacrifice of the Mincha, and the Lechem Hapanim, and the Yayin is going to be... He gave him over the keys to the temple. He said, Avram, you're now the new Kohen Gadol. And he was. And where does that leave Melech Sodom? But every good Kohen, behind every great Kohen stands a loyal king, right? So I guess I'm the king, right? And Avraham Avinu says to him, well, it's in his place. He says, Rasha was du bist in Yiddish. If you had not been, as it says later, Ra'im v'chatoyim Lashem bim'od me'od, which the Medrash says means Gilei Araya, Shvichus Damim, and Avodah Zarah all combined. The saddest case was they found out that a girl had helped a starving neighbor by taking her water and giving her grain. It wasn't even the biggest mitzvah. She got something out of it.
That's
and
the
they,
one with the tzaka that came up to Hashem?
Yes, that's the tzaka from that girl that was starving because no one would help her. The city of Sodom, no one would help her. And when somebody tried to help her, then the king of Sodom, this great tzaddik, decreed that she be killed. There was the other one where someone did an act of chesed. So what did they do to her? They put honey on her.
And the
bees ate her. Like that's a perversion of what idiom, of what expression? Eretz zavad chalav devash. Instead of a land flowing with milk and honey, turns the honey into death and destruction. The sting of the bee and not the honey of the bee. That's Sodom. Okay, but they thought they're worthy of a big chunk of Eretz Yisrael, big important chunk of Eretz Yisrael, maybe the most beautiful neighborhood in Eretz Yisrael, like Savyon, Herzliya, Petuach, one of these neighborhoods. I'm not making any comparisons, I'm sorry. I'm not making any comparison between the two. But Melech Sodom thought he's a somebody. And Avram says, Biladai, nothing here, not anything. Everything here belongs to me because I am an Eved Hashem. And I only went to this war, not for me, but for Hashem. I'm going to prove it to you. That all the spoils of war are going to be, as far as I'm concerned, for me, acherim. I want no part of it. I want no part of it. I'll give it back to you on one condition. You realize you're fired. Step back. We need new leadership in Sodom. Of course, who was the new leader? Lot. He puts him in charge, assuming the Lot was up to the task, which he was not. And that's what happened to the king. So now, by saying these words, hold on. So let's go back to our question. So why doesn't he take money? Why does he take money from Paro and not from Melech Sodom? Because Paro wasn't trying to say that I'm a partner to Avram Avinu. Just the opposite. He said, Avram, you get out of here. I'm going to stay here in Mitzrayim. You go back to Eretz Yisrael, and I'll help you. I'm going to give you a boost. Go home. And Avimelech also wasn't trying. Well, that's already more of a problem because Avram makes a bris with Avimelech, and he kind of includes him, which is why we have a problem today. From where? From which cities? Gaza, and with all places they're communists because of and even Yerushalayim, because Avram made a deal and said, okay, I'm very generous. I'll share with you. And ended up giving away the storm. So these people were not worthy to join with Avram Avinu. Lot gets expunged. Melech Sodom, how much more so? So that answers our question. Another answer why he didn't want to take money from Sodom is what you said. The Besh Chachma, or Meir Simcha says, he says it wasn't blessed money. Hashem gave Avram bracha. When somebody loses money in a war, and it's taken by force by someone, and then taken back by force, that's not how you want to earn a living. You know, it's not a great unholy, you know, you want bracha. Bracha means your meisim, your handiwork, and so on. I'll give you one more answer, which I think is unbelievable. It says biladai. Who else said the word biladai? You know, I'm out. I'm not included here. Biladai. Who said biladai? When Paro speaks to whom? Yosef, and says, I hear you're this great, you know, deity, or whatever you are. He says, no. My koach, like Avram said, is not from me. Biladai has nothing to do with me. It's all from Hashem. This is linking the two, Avram and Yosef. And I think it's a great answer, because what happens? Paro's money, how does it come?
Because the people sold, you know, they want the bread and the food.
What was going to happen to Mitzrayim? What was going to happen to Mitzrayim? They were going to be completely wiped out by famine. Is that any different than being wiped out by an army? Same idea. Whether it's a natural army of locusts or whatever it was. Or, so Yosef really also returned all the money of Paro from the danger and from being taken away, didn't he? He did exactly what Avram did. So Avram's answer to the question, he already coded into the pasuk. He says, "You're right. I shouldn't take any money from you. I shouldn't have taken any money from Paro, but I'll deal with that." Right? When I left Paro, I had no money. I had nothing. I had to go back and pay my debts along the Achsanya. Rashi says. So I took the money temporarily, alone. It wasn't I took it. I was alone, and then we repaid that how many times over through Yosef? All the wealth. I gave Paro back all the wealth in the entire world. Did it really end up staying with Paro? No. Because who was really responsible for it? Yosef. In a spiritual sense, at least, if not a loving sense. Who did it really belong to? Belonged to Yosef and to Yaacov Avinu, who was not a slave of Paro, even though Yosef temporarily was. But Yaakov had his own. They really belonged to Yaakov. So my answer I like to suggest is that he bavorn the kasha. He anticipated the question. He said, okay, you're right, I did take from Paro, but it was only for the time being, and I'm going to pay back 10 times over through my grandson, Yosef. My great-grandson, Yosef. Okay.
Doesn't Abraham understand that Hashem will give the Yidden great wealth when they leave Egypt?
Right. That was that's another good answer. Abraham had to take the wealth because it was a Maisa of a Simon Lebanon that the Jews would take the great wealth. But I'm going to tell you that it's more, based on what we're saying here, it's much more intrinsically linked. Avram demonstrated to the world his ability to defeat these four powerful kings and win all this property through Kel Elyon, whose belief in Hashem. Kel Elyon means the source of all life, including Parnasa. And he demonstrated it again through Yosef. So really, on a deeper level, it shows that all the bracha emanates from where? From Hashem. And that's what people really need to understand, and not from some idol, or not from Masiyah Dehem, and not from their own efforts. Now, two more important things. What was the philosophy of the Sodom, of this 4 or 5 king clash? So I'm going to explain it to you this way. Okay? Don't laugh. It's like we have a political problem today. 2 parties against each other, right? Different ideas. One party is the party of the secular elite.
Secular what?
The secular elite. Hammurabi and his friends, Nimrod, set up a code, and they wanted to control the world, right? Melech Sodom wasn't trying to control anybody, right? Except his own kingdom. And they were very, very wealthy. What was their philosophy and what was the other philosophy? Listen very carefully. There are 2 philosophies, politically, essentially. Either that the people are in control, they call that democracy, or the government is in control. which is really socialism or republicanism means that the people are in charge, correct? The people are in charge. Government, by the people, for the people, etc., etc. Even though they take the word Democrat, it doesn't really mean that. It means something more like socialism, which is really what's happening in America today. It's happening in Israel too. It's exactly the same. It's an incredible open reference to the Parsha, once again. Everything in the Parsha. So the clash was between two philosophies. Hammurabi and Nimrod said, we're going to build the tower, right? I don't care how many people die along that tower. You know, they all died. You know, they want to pass water to each other. There was no time. There wasn't any time they kicked them off the tower. Because what's the big picture, the big government, is what's important, and individuals do not matter at all. Sodom, righteously, was just the opposite. They say, we believe in the greatness of the individual. And that each individual has to be completely self-sufficient. Which means, you make your own money, right? Davy Crockett, you're not an American, but you know, Johnny Appleseed, Lahavdil, you run around planting seeds, and you run around shooting things, and you're gonna, you know, the Wild West, and you're gonna be a cowboy, and Teddy Roosevelt.
Like Nimrod.
Like Nimrod, except Nimrod didn't do that. Nimrod used his power, sneaky, in order to control the world. That's why Nimrod is a secondary figure in this war. It's because he sells out to Hammurabi. He sells out to his own socialist. Part of that, because he wanted to control the world. It's about control. So Sodom is not about control. It's about individual elitism. I'm going to be fabulously wealthy, I'm going to be fabulously successful. Government, schmovernment, I don't want to hear from you. Leave me alone. So why are you taxing me? Leave me alone. I want to enjoy the fruits of my labor, my elitism. So therefore, you understand that giving charity runs counter to their philosophy of elitism, right? If you help somebody, then that means that person didn't earn it, or wasn't worthy of it. They made themselves personal gods, as did Melech Sodom. It was a clash of two cultures. Which one did Avram go for? Well, he protected Eretz Yisrael, that's true. But he did not believe in the philosophy of Nimrod. He rebelled against it his whole life. He says, you're not my master, that's a false master. So in a way, the individualistic approach was very much more in line with the possibilities that Avram lived for and articulated by his behavior, right? He was an individual against the world. He denied caving into authority. That was how Avram is. That's why Jews are like that till today. That was why Lahavdil Einstein couldn't get a job after publishing his papers. You know why he couldn't get a job? Because they described him as a pushy Israelite, not gentlemanlike, you know, interrupts people. What?
Bible, did they say that?
Einstein.
Oh.
They wouldn't give him a professorship. If you wanted to be a professor, you had to be like the great, like a god. You know, he was like a Jew. He says, "Excuse me, I don't believe what you're talking about. It's garbage. Got anything to eat?" And that was, you know, his demeanor. He didn't take a haircut. He wouldn't wear fancy clothes. So he was completely anti-establishment. And they said, "We're the establishment. We don't want to be professor. You better be part of the establishment. You better look the part." He called him an Israelite. Israel Mosaic persuasion. He behaved like they wanted him to conform. He didn't conform. Never. So you could understand that in a way, Sodom had the potential, and it did. Ultimately, who's the ultimate nonconformist? Rus. Right? Isn't she? Medrash says it took 10 generations to take the stain of Lot's, you know, contemptuous act, right? Contemptible act of having a child with his own daughter, to wash away 10 generations. There is an opinion in the Gemara that a mamzer is cured after 10 generations.
Yeah.
Right? There is such an opinion. Only Mrs. Brown. Okay, because that's like a Shas question. You know Shas, you know that question. So,
It doesn't really hold up.
no, it doesn't. It's not.
No.
But the elite, idea of elite. Now, says Avram, gives an interesting analogy. He says, Michut va'atzru chanal. Let's think together. The Medrash says that reminds us of two mitzvahs. Which mitzvah is strings?
Tzitzis
And straps,
and tefillin.
tefillin, and also chalitza, the strap of the shoe, right? The Levirate marriage rejected. When a woman, his husband dies without children, the brother must marry her. That's called yibum. And if he refuses to marry her today, we don't let it anyway. Then they go through a ceremony which has a bracha, a very unusual bracha that's linked to Avram Avinu actually, and that reflects Chazal's idea that that mitzvah was earned by Avram Avinu. And
That's also
what does that mean?
That's also a connection to Ruth.
Yes, very big connection, because that's Yibum, and in effect, that's how the spark of Lot ended up coming out. So that's behind the surface. You know, those are the things that really go on, but not everybody sees them. That's what's really going on. But the question is, what does he mean? What is he communicating to Melech Sodom? He's communicating to the following. He says, you think you're part of Klal Yisrael. You think you're my equal. You think you're my partner now in the land of Israel, being a co-king. I'll be the Kohen. And that's why Melech Sodom says to Avram, what? Ten li es ha nefesh ba'at ha'rechush kach lach. What do you give to a Kohen? You give him Meiser. He says, I'm going to give you Meiser. You'll be my Kohen, and I'll be your king. All right? Nefesh, a Jewish soul. Ten li es ha nefesh. Consider me a Jew, like you are, because I'm, after all, this great elite person. Yes, but there's one problem. You may be a very great elite person, but you're completely corrupt. And you're doing all the three primary sins that the Jewish people came to the world to fix, which is why they have to give their life for it. Murder, right? Stealing, adultery, and idolatry. You're doing all of them. You cannot possibly qualify to be what we call the nefesh asher asa b'charan. Notice the connection. Ten li asa nefesh is the king of stone. But Avram was busy making nefeshes back in Haran. And there's a beautiful shot by the Shlach. The Shlach says, what does that mean? It could mean converts. Right? It could mean that they bought slaves. But on a mystical level, it means that when Avram and Sarah all the years lived together as a beautiful, loving couple, a loving embrace, and had no children, from all their efforts to have children, what happened? He says souls were created. They did have children. But they had only children, they created neshamos that would eventually find their way into the bodies of Klal Yisrael in a future nation, likely in the form of Gerim. Including who? Rus. You understand Avram's connection to Rus now? It's a nefesh asher asa b'charan. He was busy making Jewish souls. They were making Jewish souls. They weren't making Jews, they were making Jewish souls, according to the Shlach. I'm sorry. Okay, right. So now let's just pull this all together, because we have to leave in 3 minutes. One more incredible reminisce. What was the name of the type of pit that he fell into? Listen to these words. It says, Ve'emek hashidim be'eros chemar. The pit that he fell into was a pit of chet mem resh. What word does that mean to you? Chet mem resh. What word can you make out of that? Chomer, which means materialism, like interesting acquisition of wealth and so on, and physical typos. It could also mean chamor. What do we say? Wait. So it says by that he brings back who? He brings back all the rechush, that's the chomer, and then he also brings the nashim, the gamas hanashim v'sa'am. But first, he returns the rechush, because the rechush, the chomer, is what they were really interested in. And only later they were interested in the nashim and the am. Chamor. Ring a bell? What does Avram say to later to Yishmael and
You
Eliezer?
stay here with the Hamor.
You stay here. Im ha-hamor, same spelling. You're not going to be a partner with Yitzchak. Isn't that incredible? He fell into the pit of the Hamor, and Chazal said he came wagging his tail. Guess who has a tail? A Hamor. And of course, this associates with Bilam, who was the talking Hamor, who thought he was on the level of Moshe, but was really steeped in Chomer and like a Hamor. Okay, so bottom line, we have 1 minute to go, is that the stories of the Parsha are never irrelevant. They're completely current. The struggles between the 4 and 5 kings is the struggle for the soul of America and the soul of Israel today. Do you want to have a secular elite? Or do you want to have a populist religious?
In God we trust.
Yes, the founding fathers of America were righteous Gentiles. And Halavai, we spoke about this many times, that they'll find a state. So to end with a Einsteinian metaphor, the first thing out of him came quantum mechanics theory. The famous thing of quantum mechanics is the Schrodinger cat mind experiments. Remember, everything that Einstein discovered, he did it with a thought experiment. So the most famous thought experiment is Schrodinger's cat. We heard about it. There was a very brilliant person. Schrodinger said the following: if you put a cat in a box, right, what are the possibilities? Either it's alive or it's dead, right? If you're going to open that, but you can't see inside. If you open the box, there's one of two possibilities: either it's alive or it's dead. What's going on before you open the box? Is it alive or dead? So he posited it's neither. It's not neither alive nor dead. When you view it, when you, a human being, with your limited perspective and your limited intelligence, takes a snapshot of it, that's when you'll find out whether it's alive or dead. And he gave an example, like if you cut a coin in half, and there's one heads and one tails, and you mail an envelope to 2 students, right? One opens the envelope. What do they know? That the other student got the other thing, right? But those 2 envelopes are still in a state of unknown. And that's how I'm not going into detail, but that's how the items work. Once you choose what this one is going to be, the other one flips automatically into a certain state. It's one envelope, but that's what it is, because you opened one envelope, and now the other envelope is, even without opening it, you know what's in it. But what's the point? There's another state, and that's a super state, which is all is possible. Everything is possible. Okay? So before we narrow down the field, we understand that lots of possibilities exist. This was the state of Gracious. There were lots of possibilities. There were lots of people that were buzzing around, each of them trying to step into a role to just replace the Adam and Noah and help bring good to the world. And it would remain to be determined, so we see again in this parsha, the primary battle over the good and evil, and that answers our original question. Why did Avram not daven for himself to save Sodom? Because he believed on some level that Sodom was irredeemable. Even though there was a spark of goodness there, the 10 tzaddikim could draw it out. Or, better yet, preserve it.
But 8 couldn't.
You can't transform the evil. You can preserve them, but you can't transform them. But that was only when Avram was limited by not having a bris milah with Hashem. This is before the bris. Had Avram already had a bris milah, he would know that the impossible is possible. Hence, Leidas Yitzchak, out of complete impossibility.
This is before the bris.
So he's really not a Jew.
Yet. So a Jew would never say, no one's not redeemable. That's why Yerushalayim, one person can save Yerushalayim, which is the place of Hashem, 10 people for Sodom. Once Avram goes through the bris and becomes a real Jew, then we know there's hope for all evil to transform.
Thank you.